it to the alcohol industry where people who drink the headier beers are more like 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you kind of saying 3% because that probably is a more realistic outlook on who our smokers are.
Yeah. So, like you talk about it being just a couple percentages of it or whatever. And that has to be the real truth on it, because the quality of flower that's around today is just, it's not great. It's not something that I would.
Why do you think that is?
We're Jug Dealers, we're the podcast you need in your feed. Teaching the game like you never seen. Jared, Gabe, Rambo, true OGs. Masters of the globe, set your mind free. From Denver, Colorado, where the date is green. We set the data points for the SOPs. Jug Dealers Podcast, yes indeed.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jug Dealers Podcast, where we discuss all things cannabis and lifestyle related, brought to you by the good people at 5-8, and now we have jugdealers.shop and jugdealers.net, and we're back today with the second part of our Scott Reach Rare Dankness episode. This is the second part of our Scott Reach episode. We had a lot to talk about, so if you missed the first episode, go back, take a look. So let's get right to it.
So we created that Jenny Kush to just, for the first, I think 5 years it was on the market after she passed away. Every single penny that came from that went to her kids. It went to a trust, that went to her kids.
That's incredible, bro.
Yeah, man. So,
I think Dredd has some seeds of that he was going to put down that he saved.
There's a banging cut that floats around that Casey Waldrop, I think, found like down in Arizona. It's a 34%er. I think Loom has it now out in Michigan and stuff, but it's all over the U.S. that Jenny cut, So, Pamelina, that's what my best friend Greg used to call Pamela when we were young. He always referred to her as Pamelina, so that's an ode to her. Leroy was my granddad, So, man, try to keep it lively.
Let's talk about your wife a little bit, because I think, she is a very, very obviously a very important part of the story. But you guys make an interesting and unique team, because I don't really know many other places where you have a husband and wife team. And not only that, the fact that she was so supportive through the early years, which I can tell you from being married and divorced myself, that shit's hard.
Oh yeah.
That shit's real hard. So
yeah, man. You look at the divorce rate in the US right now, and it's wild. And I come from divorced parents, and for us, even, we've been through many battles together, and at the end of the day, we have the love for each other and the support for each other and the best interest for us going forward, so talking things out and working things out is always the key thing. And, for me, when I was a underground grower, I had a regular job, and that was just like my side hobby, So,
I was the same way. I was doing masonry. I always tell people, I grew cannabis to support my snowboarding habit and support my recreational habits. But I mean, I was laying brick, block, and stone from 1998 through like 2009, 10 is when I, kind of similar to you, I finally decided to, hey, which one are you going to do? You've been doing weed stuff for a while. You either got to sign up with the weed thing full time, or else you got to stick with the masonry thing full time.
Yeah. So, she always supported me. Pamela's never been much of a smoker. When she's got cramps and stuff like that, she'll puff. But she knows how passionate I get about, whatever, is the point in my life at that, whether it's bicycles, motorcycles, hunting, travel, food, like, whatever I've done over the years. She's, always been there to be very supportive. And she saw when I started Stone Mountain again, that was just me doing my thing. She saw when Rare Dankness started taking hold, like after we won that first Amsterdam Cup, beyond just like seed sales, but when we won that first Amsterdam Cup, and then immediately after that, there was this influx of interest. I mean, I'll say it. I am a horrible business person in the aspect of finishing stuff. Like I can come up with some of the most amazing ideas in the world. It gets to a point where it becomes boring or like I've delegated everything out to everybody else and there's nothing for me to do at that point. So it's like on to the next thing, So Pamela saw really early on that RD was taking a foothold, like after that cup in Amsterdam. And she stepped away from, she was a really high end beautician and wedding hair, constantly scheduled for wedding stuff and all that, which is big money. And stopped everything she was doing and came on board to like be the CEO for Rare Dankness while, I was the idea guy and the dude who was out working it and being the face or whatever. She put in the business and put the business plan into play and got the distribution set up everywhere. And has always been a better customer service person than I have. A better person dealing with employees than I ever am. She's very professional when it comes to corporate, type of business and whatnot, where for me, and I guess it's just my personality and because of the mythology of me, employees of mine tend to look at me more as a dad, which is kind of, weird. So you end up playing like the disappointed dad all the freaking time, and it's just, that's a pain in the ass. So, we're a good team in that aspect. Like I put the work in, I'm willing to do all the garden work and whatever. Like she runs the business side of stuff and
not for nothing. I know so many of us who we're good at cultivation. There's a lot of other stuff we're not so good at.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very, very seldomly do you find someone who's got that entire package. You know what I mean? Let's talk about the Rare Dankness facility, the House of Dankness that you built, because, I was cultivating at Sacred Seed at the time. And I remember when you opened that place, how it was miles past, Phil Haig really kind of revolutionized the way a lot of us grow here in Colorado and around the country.
Yep.
Obviously, you had Jair, one of the reasons we work with him so closely, because, those guys really brought the double-ended fixture and the rolling benches, which revolutionized the way a lot of us cultivate. But your facility kind of took it a step farther. And you guys really, I remember at the time, that was the most unbelievably thought out, built facility pretty much in the country at the time. Tell us kind of how that all came together.
So after Stone Mountain closed, and I was doing the Rare Dankness seed thing, I was going around to a lot of the facilities in Colorado at the time and peddling seeds, just, hey man, you guys are all growing the same 15 strains you bought off Craigslist or bought from Corey or whoever down the road. And if you grow out your own seeds and find your own genetics, you can find something that will unique to you and draw people to you, blah, blah, blah. So as I'm doing this, I'm getting to see everybody's grow. And
this is right when people were really, I built a grow in 2010 that was like 100 lights, which was a lot at the time. And right when you're doing this is when people are starting to build 5,000-6,000 light grows. So it really, you're kind of witnessing.
So in that time, I'm seeing all these grows, and most of them are like basement grows just made bigger. Really, basement grow made bigger. And I was doing consulting because at that time, Scott, not moonshiner, all that, but Scott was getting a reputation of being known as a Colorado grower who had been around a long time and all that. And I was even pompous enough at one point. I had business cards that said, "Yeah, that's Scott." People were like, "Oh, you're Scott." And, yeah, I'm that Scott. So I was doing like consulting for Pink House, River Rock, Southwest Alternative Care. Freaking everybody, man.
And for those of you who are not Colorado folks, those were all real big places.
Yeah,
when I moved here, it was like River Rock was the spot. And I got to say, just from my own things throughout, when the first time I moved to Colorado, I had my Ryder truck. I went to fill it up with gasoline. I'm so stoked to be in Colorado 2014. I look across and I see the Rare Dank skunk on this guy's hat. And I went, I'm home.
Yeah.
So that logo was officially, when I got to Colorado, I just was like, I'm home. Rare Dankness hats of dudes. So yes, it's so cool to actually meet you in real life, brother. Like, just because you had a big, Ghost Train Haze, one of my first strains that grew, man. Awesome.
Dude, that Ghost Train Haze was amazing.
It was sick.
It was amazing.
And I remember I lived in Green Valley Ranch, as I mentioned. So I was one of your first customers out there at the House of Dank. And I remember you're the first guys I saw that were canning it in the nitrogen back then. Maybe other people were doing it, but you were definitely the first. What was the reason that you guys got into the canning of nitrogen? That was so fascinating. It was little cans, perfectly sealed, no oxygen.
Yeah, man. The can came about because Colorado's so dry. That was a way to like seal it up when it was cured properly. And, it goes on from that. But I was consulting for all these like really big grows, and to a point where a lot of these guys even like gave me a room within their facility so that I could, grow some RD stuff or whatever. And they could say, Scott is, growing here or part of the deal or whatever. So, I did get to help a few companies build their, reputations here in Colorado beyond just what I did. And it's funny, man, like coming over here to your office, you go all the way down the road to Jason. Mm-hmm. There's that huge building down there on the end of Jason. I think it might be the comic
book place. Yeah.
Dude, that was a 500 light grow that I built in 2010.
Wow.
For some Russian.
That's really cool. I pass it every day. It's huge.
For like a Russian group. And like, they hired me as a consultant to come in and like help them. And they were already like involved, like once I got into that building, but I got them all the way to the point to where they flipped the electricity on, and they did it without any permits.
Oh yeah.
Or any of that type of shit. Cause I mean,
that sounds about right.
2010, 2011. And they flipped the electricity on that place, and it blew out every transformer in Globeville over here. Shut down like 15 or 20 blocks over here.
Holy shit.
And the Department of Energy or electricians or whatever came out to the facility from Denver because they figured out like where the source for that power surge
was. The massive power surge.
Yeah. So they figured it out, and we let them in because it's like, we're not trying to hide, but at the same time, these dudes didn't pull permits and stuff. And, the guy's like, none of this stuff is like UL listed, or, I mean, things like they were really paying attention for like back then.
It was.
And one of the Russian dudes, I can remember be like, oh, it's cool, man. I have a whole roll of those stickers in my car. Like once they leave, we'll just put it on everything. And the inspector for the city was just like, what did he just say? And it was like, I'm done. Like I'm finished with this project. I got paid. I'm walking out,
That's funny.
But I had seen so many like really big grows and been part of so many big grows that were just like horribly designed. Basically you had to take a building and make it something.
And it's like you said, I mean, a lot of people were just emulating what they had done in their basements, and they were building a lot of different basement rooms in their house, but they weren't doing, what you were talking about.
Yeah, man. So I'm a Disney head. Like I'm a Disney adult, so I love going to Disney World. I think their agricultural facilities that they have down there, the greenhouses and stuff like that, are just some of the most amazing state-of-the-art facilities that, exist. And at that time, we just took basically a schematic of what Prevo was doing down there in Disney. And I found a shell of a building that was 30 feet or 40 feet or whatever to the top. And we put in a second floor, double stacked it, but instead of double stacking, we like double stacked the building.
You did it right.
Yeah. Put an elevator in, a second floor. I mean, did everything, and then built out the facility with workflow and plant flow in mind, which at that time hadn't been done.
No, it had not.
And I think the other difference was a lot of the facilities that had been built at that time had been built up to a certain point with, we've got $100,000 to spend, or we've got $1 million to spend, or whatever. I went out and found a private investor that didn't want part of Rare Dankness, but wanted to just, be part of the cannabis industry. I was a commercial real estate investor and did a personal guarantee for, $7 million. And, I'll give you my house if this thing goes, belly up or whatever, but I don't have cash to put down on it. I'm not putting my brand. I'll put my reputation on it. So I borrowed the $7 million and we built that place out, and a lot of the companies at that time, whether it was Jove with the rolling tables or Gavita or whatever, didn't really want to deal with the weed industry. Not simply because it was the weed industry and it was a touchy subject for a lot of them, but because the money just wasn't there for them.
Mm-hmm.
Big company doesn't want to sell 10 grand worth of lights. They want to sell $1 million worth of lights, So we were one of the first companies that really got industrial or commercial agricultural companies interested in the cannabis industry from a investment, standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So I built that facility. We opened it in 2016.
Yep. I remember there were lines out the door.
I like to tell people I never built that facility to get rich. I built it to be free. And what I mean by that was we as a community, as we've built this industry, have really neglected the home growers. Like as much as we've been fighting to build the regulations and stuff for our commercial industry, hoping that federal legalization comes someday, we've really forgotten about the home grower. And for me, even though I had my Loveland facility and I had a little home grow and whatever, my kids were getting to be that age where they were really influenced by what they were seeing, snooping, all that type of stuff. And I got to a point where I was like, man, I need to move the home grow completely out of the house, just have a commercial grow and, do whatever. So having my reputation at the time and finding the investor and having the building, we put all that together really so that I could have a place to grow and do my thing and not have it in my house around my kids. And, the first few years it was freaking awesome. I've always just done my own thing, breeding strains within that thing to bring to Colorado. I never brought in the rare dankness parental genetics to create seed within that facility.
Mm-hmm.
That was just never something.
As I remember, you started that whole building from seed, didn't you?
I sourced luckily Rare Dankness had a good selection of metric available genetics.
Mm-hmm.
And I called up everybody that I had Ghost Train Hayes or Scott's or Starkiller or whatever. Hey man, let me get a cut of that back. And I was able to bring 12 or 15 strains back to that. But then everything that we could bring in, we just restarted from seed, once we got everything rolling and, we were able to go, just so we could have different selections of those. You self things and, bring out the self seeds or whatever, but, that facility never had the full scope of what RD does. And it never had the parents of my seed varieties or whatever. But it was a good enough thing to where we could display RD genetics, create our own extracts. I mean, we had our own extraction lab and all that, and not have to buy everybody in the state's products, And for the first few years, it was really good. And then we had a crazy, crazy cold winter, 2019, crazy cold, bitter cold winter. And one of my engineers on my chiller setup, HVAC setup, we were having some humidity issues, decided to change the glycol ratio in the chiller. And
unit froze.
And dude, froze the fucking unit.
Yep.
And so we had to at that point, 2019, I had to, lay off half the staff because we didn't have the whole production up and running. Brought in a rental chiller that was on an 18-wheeler, so it could run half the building. Kept the bills paid, kept the employees paid, kept, rent paid, all that. But it became unenjoyable. Once you see what really managing a huge commercial facility runs in, especially when you start having problems. Mechanical problems are one thing, personnel problems, totally different story.
Well, and one of the things for any of our listeners, just so you know, we have listeners around the entire planet, Australia, Guam, England. We have a lot of listeners in England. For any of you who don't know, the chiller system is a single unit that you use for an entire building. You know,
and I had put two. You know, I had a redundancy.
Really?
But he killed both of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, killed both of them. Killed basically $1 million worth of equipment in a 2-week period.
Unbelievable.
You know? So, I mean, that all went through litigation, and I mean, it was a nightmare. And that company, I don't think even exists anymore. You know, that was responsible for that. But for me, again, I'm not a great business person. I started to see the stress that was causing Pamela, you know, because she was the CEO of House of Dankness and that facility. And, you know, again, dealing with 50 different personalities of your employees. Like, again, I'm disappointed dad at the facility. So, you know, every day I'm just hearing everybody's problems. It got to a point where I was like, you know, like I'm way more suited for breeding. I'm way more suited for like boutique growing. The commercial side of this industry is something like I just never intended to have this much difficulty, you know, or work. Again, we're weed growers, old school weed growers. We're trying not to work as much.
Yeah.
So like, again, like my daily workout.
So I started growing weed.
Yeah. You know, like all of a sudden my daily outwork, you know, output of work instead of being 6 or 8 hours is like 18 hours of the day. Like, this is not what I signed up for. So, I started like shopping House of Dankness around to find a buyer and, or a partner, not a buyer, but a partner. And, found this group in Alabama that's like involved with beverage, distribution.
Kind of ironic that it all circles back to Alabama.
Exactly. And, again, you know, they came in, I was like, Rare Dankness is not for sale. You know, like I'm going to maintain 100%, you know, ownership of this, but HOD, like I'm willing to let half of it go. And since you guys have the experience of like managing a big facility and multiple people and all this, like maybe you guys can make it work, you know? And, through COVID and all that, like it was a pain in the ass, like dealing with all the masks and cleaning procedures and everything else that were on top of the, you know, SOPs that we already had. And,
I mean, as I remember, your building was shower in, shower out, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you guys were, I remember when Dread started there, the protocols that you went through were unlike anything you saw in any of the scrubs, right?
Yeah. We never had an insect outbreak. We had PM like once. And again, I'm the old school grower that doesn't deal with this type of stuff. Like I'm not going to remediate it or whatever. Like I'm cutting tables down and we're throwing it in the garbage.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
And so, you know, when you bring in partners and you start doing shit like that, they just like, you know, like that's not really how we want to like do things, or that's not how to be profitable or whatever. And so I maintained 100% of Rare Dankness. I sold 50% of House of Dankness, brought these guys in.
And that's who currently owns it now?
I mean, I still own it. I'm still own it, but yeah,
the other 50% that's currently who the partner is now.
Yeah, is the guys from Alabama. And, you know, like for me, I was still running. I was still head of operations and all that through COVID. And then after COVID was starting to tail off, I started to see across the country this like crash. And again, dealing with all the issues that we had mechanically, dealing with the personnel issues of just daily managing people's.
I attribute a lot of that crash to Oklahoma.
So,
I mean, I understand Oklahoma probably feels the way they do about things, but y'all ruined the market for the rest of the country.
So I took it as writing on the wall that I should like go back to just breeding, go back to just boutique consulting for, you know, whatever. And, took myself out of the day-to-day operations of House of Dankness. And they brought Corey in from Green Man.
Corey Buffkin.
And, you know, Corey's been managing that grow for the last 2 years.
And crushing it.
Yeah, he's doing a good job. Like, you know, as good a job as you can do here in the state, you know, I got to say. So with the regulations the MED puts forth and constantly changes, like it's just a huge pain in the ass. But yeah, man, they do a good job. And again, like I license them the logo and the name, so that it keeps that business in the spotlight and keeps it branded and allows me to have a branded place within, the country and all that.
Did you do a spot in Michigan as well?
Man, so that spot in Michigan, like it was in Ann Arbor. We got it all the way to almost to inspections, and the market started to crash everywhere. And my buddy that was building that was just like, dude, like give me a idea of what's going on. And I was like, yeah, for the next 5 or 6 years, like it's going to be a bloodbath. It's
going to be rough.
Yeah. It's going to be,
it has been.
Yeah. It's going to be a bloodbath. So I don't know if that's how you want to do your retirement. And he sold it, so, before we got it open, we sold it, so, I've been talking with a few groups. I mean, I've talked to people in Vegas and California and Maryland and everywhere else about doing, just rare dankness, like royalty strains. And that's kind of what we're, looking at now. But yeah, man, I've always kind of been a few steps ahead of what's happening within the industry. And for me right now, like until there's some federal movement on it, I don't think there's a place back for me in the large scale manufacturing, like I belong in the consulting space.
Right. So I do want to get into your thoughts on federal movement, but before we do that, I have a question that I've been wanting to ask for a little bit. You talked about your breeding and kind of how you do things. As I remember when we were talking about this before the show, you don't reverse a lot of things and make a lot of fem gear.
I do. I mean, I do some fems. I mean, the market calls for it. So you kind of have to do some of that. I don't do any autoflowers. Like I don't mess at all with any autoflowers. My fem lines are very limited, and they're usually based on just the most popular varieties.
How do you, so in that respect, what is your criteria for selecting males? Because I don't know that a lot of our listeners necessarily have a criteria. So from someone who's done it quite a bit, what are you looking for?
I always say, and I used to say this a lot to people on the forums, when you're choosing a male from a pack of seeds, you got 15 plants growing there. If there's a plant early on that's just, in your vision, early on when you're looking at your plants, you're just like, man, that one. That one looks really great.
I tell that to people all the time. You can always spot the winners.
Yeah, dude. Like when whether it has more vigor. I mean, you're looking at internodal strength, stretching. You're looking at, vigor. You're looking at how well it cloned. You're looking at, a lot of different things. But for me, it's like when I'm growing out a pack of regular seeds, if there's a plant that I'm just like, let that be a female. God, I hope that's a female. And then it turns out to be a dude.
That's the one.
Give him a try.
Right.
Give him a try. You won't know until you grow out the seeds that you've made from that cross with him. But, when there's a plant that just speaks to you, give him a try, but I think you have to have certain criteria. I mean, you got to look at the internodal stretch. You got to rub the stem and smell the plant. Pay attention when you're popping leaves off, if there's an odor that comes out of it. Ultimately, when you flower that male, you're looking at the flower sacs. Is there any trichome production on the actual, male flowers or whatever? Is there a scent to the pollen? There's a lot of things that.
Okay. I've never even thought about that.
But for me, the very first criteria is if you see a plant that just stands out to you, that you just pray is the best female in the group, and then it turns out to be a dude, use him, try him out, for fem plants, I used to, when people would reverse fem plants to make, fems, it was just done kind of without thought. I think it still is a lot. People just spray the STS, silver sodium thiosulfate, spray that on there, see if it reverses, hit your plants with it, and then look at the seedling ratio of what's herms. That was kind of always, that plant turned out really hermy or whatever. When I started reversing plants, the ones that I like to use to make fems with are the ones that are like impossible to flip. Like you can soak them down in STS and they're just like, yeah, I'm going to stay a girl, and And then if they do flip, they don't produce pollen, or they might produce pollen like 1 out of every 5 flips or something. Like those are the plants you want to make films with, because there's a lot less likely chance that there's going to be hermaphrodites, throughout that.
Okay.
But, 15 years ago when people were doing that, or 20 years ago when people were first making films, it was like White Widow, like White Widow crossed with everything, or skunk crossed with everything. And it's because those were very easy to reverse strains. Because in a normal flowering cycle, any stress, pH stress, newt stress, light stress would cause them to hermaphrodite, so,
Yep.
yeah, man, selection's always just been about one of those things that it's very personal, even with your THC plants, for you consumption, like everybody's cannabinoid system is different. It's going to affect you differently. Like find the stuff you like, man.
When I always tell people, like pheno hunting, for what it's worth, it's still a very personal thing for a lot of people, because, and I don't know that a lot of people look at pheno hunting the same way that I do, but, I'm definitely looking for the traits that I like, not only from the parents, but the grandparents as well.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so, but for me, I could be looking for something totally different than what someone else's pheno hunting is looking for. So realistically, my selection is my selection because it's what I like, but it's purely only my opinion, Let's talk about, you discussed federal legalization. What are your thoughts on what we might see? I had a lot of people ask me in Vegas, especially because we saw a lot of foreigners, and with the new administration coming in, there's a lot of stuff that's up for discussion as far as what could happen. What do you see as far as the next? I'll open it up. I don't want to say the next year or so, because I think it's a little short-sighted. But what do you see as far as the next 5-10 years happening in the cannabis industry?
So my current view on the cannabis industry would be that, everything prior 2015 that was being imported into this country, cartel standards, like, whoever, that's what the commercial industry of the U.S. has replaced. Just replaced the imported weed for the most part. That high-end, super high-end connoisseur level of weed, I honestly think it's less than like 3% of the total population of cannabis users is the ones that are really, looking for that stuff. Yeah. So,
interesting you say that. I've always likened it to the alcohol industry, where people who drink the headier beers are more like 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you kind of saying 3%, because that probably is a more realistic outlook on who our smokers are.
Yeah. So, like you talk about it being just a couple percentage of it or whatever. And that has to be the real truth on it, because, the quality of flower that's around today is just, it's not great. It's not something that I would.
Why do you think that is?
I see a lot of really good grown flower, like while it's still alive and whatever. But I think the post-harvest cure, dry, like all that, like it's not readily understood by the masses, and it's definitely not understood by the regulators. I had a cure room at House of Dankness. So I would cut down plants. They go into the dry room. They would dry. We de-stem them. They go into the cure room. They'd spend anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks in that cure room before they would be allocated to be packaged or whatever. MED don't like that. MED don't like the idea of a cure. They want it dried and then packaged.
Interesting.
So I banged heads with them.
It's been so long. Honestly, I hate to say it, it's been so long since I grew weed in Colorado legally that I think I stopped. I moved to Maryland in 2017. So I literally haven't grown any legal weed here in 7 years.
Yeah, man. So, they don't understand that. So to be able to cut down a room, to dry it, to move it into a cure, allow it to cure based on what that variety needs, whether it's like OGs, I like OGs fresh. I want them dried and maybe cured a week. they got the most banging flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Purple varieties, man, 4 weeks minimum, 4 weeks on those things. Hazes,
Listen up to this, kids, because this is the stuff. These are the nuances that I think a lot of people in commercial facilities just don't have the ability to. And not to mention, I will say, not only that from an MED or let's say a governing body standpoint, but a lot of times, when I was in Maryland, if I had the GMO or certain other genetics, they just want it out as quick as possible because it's already sold.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So in markets like that, it's, hey, how do we get this out as quick as possible because it's sold?
Yeah. And that's not necessarily the case in Colorado, or was it a couple of years ago? Like there was thousands of pounds sitting in metric at times in Colorado. So, I think that just the quality of weed, for me, it's just disappointing. I come from that era of grower where you had to be the grower, breeder, hash maker, salesperson to a certain degree. And you were the one that controlled that. And nowadays you've got, entire groups of employees that control those different, aspects of it. And if they don't have the, it's not just knowledge, like you can write SOPs, man, but for people to have intuition,
dude, I tell people all the time, I can teach people everything I know, and I have no problem with that. The biggest thing you cannot teach someone is intuition.
Yep.
And I really appreciate you saying that because it is something that has been consistent out of my mouth in the last 15 years is that, I can give you the recipe. Doesn't mean the food's going to taste the same.
Not at all.
I mean,
I have a buddy right now that's running a really, really big grow, 500,000 square feet grow. And he hired one of my main guys and, calls me a few weeks ago and he's just like, dude, I don't get it. I've hired your right hand and, I'm doing all this stuff and, it's just, I'm not getting to the level that I think I need to get at. And it's like, dude, it's a big commercial grow. You can't be a boutique grow when you're that ginormous without having to have somebody with that intuition, running things. And not to sound cocky, but you're not me, you're not me, dude. And you inspire the guy that you hired from me in a different way to work for you. Maybe you bark orders or whatever, that was never me. I'm the guy that would get in the garden, work beside him, try to explain what I'm seeing, try to explain what I'm doing. And, not a lot of owners were, ever like that.
No.
I would get people in the garden when we hired new employees sometime that would just be like, dude, is that Scott over there, working, pruning pruning leaves or whatever? And they're like, yeah, Scott works in the garden. But for the federal stuff, what I hope and what I feel, and again, referencing back to you saying it's like alcohol. If you looked at the end of prohibition for alcohol and then when the market for micro brews or whatever came about, end of prohibition was 30s.
Yeah, 1934, something
34,
like that, 35. So, and ironically enough, the middle of the Depression.
Yep.
So
the first micro brewers type of beer was out of Oregon or Washington or something in the late 70s. So it was that many years before the populace became educated enough or differentiated enough in their taste that they wanted something better.
Mm-hmm.
So I think weed's going to kind of go the same way. There's a lot of dudes out right now trying to create these high-end brands.
Mm-hmm.
There's just too small of a percentage of the end or population that wants those. I saw somebody selling $100 eighths the other day and it's I
think Nicotine had one last year. It was a $250 eighth, but
people aren't educated enough on that just yet. Well, we get to a point like we are now. So with say bourbon, average price of a regular bottle of bourbon is $20 or $30. High end bottle of bourbon, like Pappy's or something like that. I mean, that's a couple $1,000s.
Yep.
So
I was liking it to wine.
Yeah.
I always tell people you have the same size bottle, cost you $5, cost you $5,000.
Yep.
And there's people who like the $5,000 bottles. It's just a question of the thing that I always find very unique about cannabis is, and this is where I've always, it's refreshing to hear your take on it because one of the things I've always pointed out to people is if you have a bottle of wine that's $5 or $5,000, cannabis will never be $5,000 an eighth. You know, maybe at the most, like I said, with the nicotine thing, maybe $250. You know, so that's one thing that I've always likened with cannabis.
Still trying to wrap your head around a $250 eighth.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Like that.
That's
it better
wild,
be.
man.
It better be pink and not sprayed pink.
Yeah.
You know. So,
So I think what's going to happen is more states will come online. The price compression will keep crushing it down and down and down. Metric's going to open it up at some point where you can move products state to state. But until there's federal movement of reschedule, deschedule, or something.
I say reschedule, deschedule, unschedule.
I'd say unschedule.
You know?
I mean, I don't think this plant deserves to be classified any way. So until that happens, I don't think the masses will educate themselves enough to really create that high-end market that that we lived in or believe in or lived, whatever. So, next 5 years, you're going to see Trump's going to do something, The
one thing I point out to people though, is we already had 4 years of Trump.
Yeah.
And he didn't do anything. And he didn't
Yeah.
do anything. So, I mean, and not for nothing, Biden said he was going to do something and didn't do anything. So, it's not like there's this giant rush. The other question I kind of pose to people as well is, with federal legalization comes federal regulation, and so in that respect, I've said to a bunch of folks, I personally feel like they'll implement FDA spec, some type of GMP spec on the buildings, in which I won't be surprised if you see a lot of facilities get shut down because of it, because it's going to cost
80% or better. It's
six figures, in which then at that point, I would like to see, personally, the price of cannabis go back up. I think it's, to be fair, I think it's too cheap, And I know there's a lot of listeners that probably wouldn't agree with that because they like getting $20 eighths, but a $20 eighth is only ever going to be a $20 eighth.
So I even say lower. I think the commercialized weed that's out right now, $15.
Sure.
$15, you should be good to go. When there is a market for really high end stuff, I still think $60 an eighth. It's like, that's outrageous.
Yeah. Do you think, going back to the quality thing, do you think that the HPS versus LED has anything to do with that? How do you feel on that personally?
Man, I've been growing a long time. So I've grown the gamut of single-ended bulbs, double-ended bulbs, ceramic metal halide, LED, a zillion different LEDs at this point. Plasma. I mean,
yeah, you were the first one to have those. Those Gavita plasmas. I actually had those in one of my buildings. They're
garbage. I think I had a 65% failure rate on those.
Okay.
Dying, fixtures dying. It was horrible. So, man, I think the LEDs that are coming around nowadays are pretty amazing. Like you can get some just amazing yields and amazing looking plants and trichome production and everything. I always was a fan of the double-ended. I mean, the yields that you can pull from double-ended bulbs is, it's just amazing. I mean, you don't have to have the best methodology of trellising and stuff like that and still pump out some weight. I think with LEDs, you got to be a little more dialed in on your scrog, your trellis aspect and trellis gang and stuff. But yeah, man.
Is there a fixture that you prefer to breed under?
No, I think I grew everything under LEDs at this point in my life. But I will say that from growing indoor seeds to growing outdoor seeds, there is a difference, in seed size. Just because the calyx is a little different sized on an outdoor plant. It's usually fatter and, more swollen. So you get a little larger seed from outdoor production. The problem with outdoor production of seed is like you can get wind drift and catch pollen that you don't have any idea where it came from, So, yeah, man. So, on the quality aspect, I'm really disappointed in what the industry has accepted as a quality, thing.
Metric.
Yeah, as a metric for the quality. We get so hung up in with terpene percentages or THC percentages. Or,
Some markets are so heavy on the on the THC numbers. It's crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, yeah, I laugh because I had a Oregon test come back a few years on Star Killer that was like 60%. And it's just like,
yeah, that's not possible.
It's not possible. You know, like physically, it's not possible for that plant to produce that. But again, that stuff is only as good as the labs that are doing the testing or how scrupulous they are on their numbers and all that stuff. But, you know, I'll say, and it'll sound kind of arrogant, in the last 30 years, I've only bought probably a pound of weed from friends.
Yeah.
I've never,
I don't disagree with that statement.
I've never bought a gram of weed for myself from a dispensary.
It's funny you say that because I was thinking when Grambo talked about the weed in the cans, I think that's like, I've maybe shopped at a dispensary 5-6 times in the last 15 years.
Yep.
That's one of the times I went to the dispensary was to buy that cannabis. Cause I was so intrigued by it, you know, but it's funny for me because I'm the same as you. I mean, if I'm not smoking my own flower,
I'm just not going to smoke.
Yeah. For me, I mostly smoke hash.
Yeah.
So I don't even smoke much flower anymore, in which I'm usually still smoking my own hash too.
So
BHO, by the way, none of that rosin nonsense.
So I'll tell you, my belief right now, as far as why extracts are so popular, is not just that ease of use and ease of consumption, like whatever. It's the quality of the flower.
Mm-hmm.
If the quality of the flower was a lot better, you'd have people that were, you know, keen on fucking buying.
I love smoking.
Like
you know, it's funny because
the pre-rolls are horrible.
Oh yeah.
You know, like
I quit smoking cigarettes 25 years ago, but I always tell people I still smoke. I'm still a smoker. Yep. And it's funny you say that because you're absolutely right. Someone gives me good flower, man. I got some flower from Jake Greba a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
And it's funny because
Jake's good dude.
Aesthetically wise, it isn't some of this flashy stuff that you see from a lot of other people, but flavor wise and smoke wise, absolutely delicious, you know, and realistically I think that's what people should be looking for. You know, if you go into Gordon Ramsay's restaurant and you see a beautiful plate of food and it tastes like shit, you're not going back. No. You know, it doesn't. And if it costs a lot of money, you're definitely not going back.
And you're telling your friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's funny you say that because I agree with that. I agree with that sentiment for sure.
So I was always the guy here in Colorado that, again, I never bought my friend's weed. My friends always bought my weed or got my weed. And when I was out, which was very rarely, I just take a 2-week tolerance break or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to Soma, like I've known Soma so many years. Soma did a podcast a couple months ago where he talks about buying weed from me like in the mid 90s and how good it was. And I was like, dude, I was baby face, freaking fresh footed, you know, like I don't even look back at that time as being a grower, you know, just excited to be part of that culture, you know, and it's been a crazy 30 years, you know, like I've seen a lot of stuff come about, a lot of stuff that I never thought I would see in my lifetime, especially the way the recreational market has happened and whatnot.
I never thought when I voted for it in 2013, I never thought it would be, you know, considering when we were kids and how illegal it was and how, you know, basically no progress was made from, I'll just say, I mean, really, we took a big step back with Nixon, you know, but when Nixon really kind of scheduled things and created all that, you know, we haven't seen any strides, you know, for a long time through like, you know, basically Obama getting elected.
Yep.
But you wouldn't have envisioned from the Cole memorandum to now having as many strides as we've had, considering how little we grew between those two periods. So you're absolutely right in that respect. In that, you know, I didn't see the whole West Coast being legal. I didn't see a lot of the East Coast being legal. And when I say that, I'm talking recreational. It's pretty wild to see. And hopefully we can figure out a way to unschedule things so that we can really free the plant and, you know, make it more accessible for everybody. Final question. what's the future of rare dankness? Where do you see yourself the next 5-10 years?
Oh man. Most likely in the next, I'd say 3 to 5 years, I'd like to find someone, if it's changed federally, I'd like to find a big group that just buys the Rare Dankness brand, allows me to continue to breed, but also allows me to continue to create. Because I'd make 2 or 3 more brands before I'm done. But for us, it's like, maintaining the genetics, coming out with new stuff that reflects my personal taste and not what the market is, striving for, demanding for. Move into a few more states with like the royalty type, deals with the brand aspect. But for me, like I'm going to continue to breed. I'm going to continue to grow for myself. I'm going to continue to create strains that I find fascinating and good, and all that fun stuff. It's funny. 10 years ago, I thought my kids would be right on my boot heels and, following that. Like, neither one of my kids have any interest, in the cannabis industry. They've seen how much work that I've put in the last 10 or 15 years. And they're just like, yeah, that shit's too much work, Dad, So, yeah, man, I want to see it descheduled. I want to see it just like the feds just quit worrying about what people are doing at home. I like to see home grow rights be cemented, where you're allowed to have certain amount of plant, certain amount of poundage, like all that, you're just allowed to. My hope is that the Bible Belt will change their views, but that doesn't appear to be happening.
That's really the last kind of stronghold that Georgia, Alabama, South North Carolina. You can't even include Mississippi anymore because they're changing. They're medical. Louisiana is medical, and ironically enough, Louisiana actually has reciprocity.
Yeah.
So that's actually, and for those of you who don't know, that means you can go there with a medical card from another place and use it in Louisiana. So you're absolutely right. That last little belt down there kind of.
Yeah, man. I don't ever plan on returning to Alabama to be my retirement or anything like that. I do plan on going back south to retire though. I'll end up in Mississippi or Louisiana.
Is Pamela from Alabama as well?
She's from Mississippi.
Okay.
Yeah, she's from Mississippi. So
it's funny. That's my mother's name. So,
honestly, we were both looking at the Carolinas, but then after what just happened in Asheville, no, I don't.
Hey man, used to think that was a safe place. Yeah. We were at Halloween last year, met a guy, and he goes, we asked him, he's lived all around the country. We go, what's the best place you think you live? He goes, Asheville. They're safe from everything.
No,
not anymore.
Not anymore, dude. Yeah. So, at some point I'll retire into that aspect of it, but I'll continue to breed as long as I've got breath in my body.
You can't take it out of you.
And, who knows what's going to happen with the brand and with the industry and all that. I mean, we talked about the legacy aspect and being legacy, and there needs to be a different word for people who operated within this realm before there was medical. And I don't know, maybe pioneer status would be something. I mean, we have the pioneer plates here in Colorado.
That's right.
For people that are homesteaders. So
Scott and I had a little discussion before the show about legacy, and we feel like there should be a term for people who did not cultivate under the guise of medical, which would be pretty much pre-2004 or something like that,
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a bunch of us, and I might have to use that pioneer status.
Status, man.
Because I think that's the best thing I've heard so far. Any interesting, fun breeding projects you're working on right now?
Always, but again, I breed stuff for myself, and then whether or not it makes it out onto the market is, who's to say? Usually it's Pamela to say whether that makes it on the market.
She's the ultimate yes or no.
Yeah. But for me, I've got I've got some OG crosses from OGs that never were circulated. That I've been banging through here, the last little bit. Actually,
OGs are making I think for people like us, the OGs never went anywhere. But I think for a lot of people, the OGs are making a comeback.
so I'll tell you this Stone Mountain story real quick. When I had Stone Mountain, I put in the strains at that store that were like my favorite strains. OGs, Hazes, Sour Diesel, Kim, stuff like that. And for the first 6 months, I'd have people come in and go, where's your White Widow? Where's your Wonder Woman? Where's your Dreamsicle? Where's your, and ask for all these strains that were just like, dude, those are okay strains, but they're not to the level of these varieties. And if you just try these varieties, like you'd understand, like you're going to smoke less of them. You're going to be high longer. You might find more medicinal applications from some of these varieties, whatever. So you would convince people to buy Golden Goat or like whatever. And then after about 6 months, I was working to bring in some of these varieties that people were asking for just to like have them on the shelf. And it got to a point where nobody would ask for those things anymore. And they would want, San Fernando Valley. I'd want Ghost OG. I'd want the Triangle. I'd want, Kim D or Kim 4. Like
all
whatever.
the classics, bro.
So, like we went through all this trouble to bring in all these strains. And then it was just like, kill all those moms. Like we don't even want those moms. Just continue to grow what we grow. And, that was one of the insights that I had that, I know that I should be breeding for what I like because that store had everything that I liked in it. And ultimately that's what people started to like.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, people were like, oh, Sour Diesel's coming back. And I'm like, never left my garden.
Never went anywhere for me.
Yeah.
To wrap it up, where can people find your genetics? What are all your social media handles so that people can,
okay. First and foremost, if you want to get in contact with me, Scott@raredankness.com. Like you can email me. I'm happy to answer emails. That's the direct line to get straight to me. If you have like just basic grow questions, whatever, info@raredankness.com. I, on Instagram, am Rare Dank. That's my personal page. There's a lot of growing stuff on there, but it's a lot of travel, a lot of cats and dogs, my life. That's a representation of my daily journey. Rare Dankness brand on Instagram is our brand page. Rare Dankness Global is the worldwide, global page. Best place for seeds for me is Attitude Seed Bank USA. Attitude Seed Bank's been in the UK for over 20 years. Natalia, who owns that company, has been a friend and a freaking awesome person in the industry to have as a good friend. And she does an amazing job, with our seeds. And 2 years ago, she opened a Colorado outpost of Attitude. So there is an Attitude Seed Bank USA based here in Colorado. That carries a wide array of North American breeders and some European breeders. But again, you're not having to ship it in from the UK or overseas or whatever. It's sourced right here in Colorado.
And that stuff's all legal in the US nowadays with the Farm Act, right?
Yeah. Under the hemp bill, the farm bill, seeds are 100% legal.
Nothing like when we were younger.
and I mean, it's crazy to the legality of it. Like, so I know we're trying to wrap this up.
No, dude.
But we were talking about banking.
Yeah.
Like I've had banking for 10 years almost with a good big bank that knows exactly what I'm doing. I was part of their pilot program.
Credit union or a bank?
A bank. Their auditors are insane. The application to get that banking was bigger than my mortgage, to get my house and stuff, bigger than the MED license to get the grow. I mean, the banking stuff it's going to be key. That is definitely a key point to make this industry move forward is banking. But, I've had banking for years and years and years. I think, for the biggest part of really moving this industry forward, like you said, is what the feds are going to do, and then banking,
Any parting words for our listeners?
No, man, I really appreciate you having me on here. I don't do a lot of podcasts.
I know you don't.
You know, like I spend a lot
TMB told me you reached out and said, "Hey, is this something I really want to do?"
Yeah, man. Like I really appreciate that people want to hear what I have to say or find some comfort or whatever. And, hearing, my story, but I never set out to do any of this, man. Like I was just a farm kid that wanted to grow weed to pay for his motorcycles and his bike stuff.
Yep.
Maybe a trip to Europe once a year. And every step of the way, this journey, there's been forks in the road, and sometimes you choose the right fork. Sometimes you choose the left fork. Sometimes it's not the right path, and you got to be smart enough to bring yourself
be able
back.
to pivot.
Yeah. Bring yourself back to what's important to you. And I think as far as industry goes, I'm one of the few people who've had really amazing opportunities and then had some, not so nice stuff come up as well. And, for me, staying true to what I believe in and my goals for my company and my family and stuff like that, I've had to make some tough decisions. And at the end of the day, I've always been happy with the decisions I made.
Dude, you've always stayed true to who you are in that. And if that doesn't show in your genetic catalog, I don't know what does, and I appreciate that about you. And not for nothing, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story, giving our listeners a little glimpse into something deeper than just the Rare Dankness brand. And honestly, I think the whole story today really helps kind of solidify that ethos of who you are and what's important to you. And I appreciate it. I really do.
Thanks, Gabe. I appreciate it, brother.
Hell yeah. Well, dude, another great episode.
This was a good one.
Yeah, this was a solid
great.
one.
Yes.
So to all our listeners out there, we appreciate you as always. Peace and love, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.